Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. Now in our today's video, we are going to talk about Gen Zs, particularly why are Gen Zs protesting. Now Gen Zs across the world, they are not happy at all, be it Himalayan nations like Nepal or be it island nations of Madagascar. From Western African countries to Morocco, now to Latin America, that is in Mexico, Gen Zs are protesting against their governments. So what are the common reasons why they are protesting? What is the difference about their protest? Everything we are going to understand in our today's video. Now this topic is very important from your exams perspective. So that is why the notes that I will be using, I want you all to download them and they will be available on a particular Telegram channel, ATS Live. And while you're in this channel downloading the notes, please do not forget to subscribe to it also. Okay, so let us start by understanding why are Gen Zs not happy at all. Now, after Gen Z's protests swept across the globe, be it countries like Nepal, Morocco, or Madagascar, now they have spread to Mexico, and they in Mexico are protesting against the government. So in Mexico City, hooded protesters gathered around the National Palace, which is the official residence of President of the Mexico, and they tore down some of the fences. Now in this protest, around 100 people, including the policemen as well as Gen Z protesters, were injured. So this basically highlights a kind of turmoil that currently is faced by Mexico and has been faced by many countries, including Nepal, where it resulted into fall of the Maoist government, right? So why are Gen Zs protesting? What is the common driver which is leading them to protest against their respective regimes? Let us try to find out that first. Now, first of all, there is a reason why these countries are witnessing Gen Z's protests. It is because the large presence of Gen Zs in these countries. For example, Madagascar, which is an island nation in east of Africa, their people under 18 years of age constitute about 50% of population. So the first driver is the presence of large number of Gen Zs or younger people in these countries. Now you need to understand what is the biggest cause of concern for younger people. They require higher quality of life, and to require or to bear that higher quality of life, they need to have jobs which will support them financially, right? So this is what the biggest concern of younger people is. Now, younger people are often told that the sure shot way out of poverty is nothing but to get good education. So suppose even if that younger people are provided good education in this country, but is that everything that a younger person would need? The answer is no. That is only job half done. So to provide an educated youth, you need to provide them with good quality jobs in different sectors like manufacturing, like services, right? So when these governments or when these economies are unable to provide adequate amount of jobs to large amount of youth population, it breeds economic frustration. This unemployment, this poor prospects of future, this mismatch between their rising expectation and the ground reality, it breeds discontent, it breeds differentiation. So this is the first cause of concern, that these countries that we have discussed have large population of younger people, but these economies have been unable to provide these younger people with the kind of jobs that they require to do and fulfill their aspirations, which are quite high. So these are the first reasons, purely economic and demographic. Now let us understand different reasons also. Now whenever a youth of a country is facing discontent, the natural way in a democracy to do that is to make political representation, is to demand compensation from the political representatives, right? This is the right way to do in a democratic setup, which all these countries are. But you need to understand there is a difference in terms of political representation of the youth as well as the number of these youth in these countries. For example, I'll take the example of India. India is also fairly a younger country where average age is 27.8 years old. So this is average age of India. Now in 2024, India elected 18th Lok Sabha, right? So the average age of MPs in 18th Lok Sabha is 56 years old. So understand there is a difference in the average age of Indians, which are 27.8 years old, and average age of Indian legislators who represent these younger Indians in the Lok Sabha, which is 56 years old. So most of the youth in these countries, in these democratic setups, they often feel excluded from political representation. They understand that legislative bodies and the formal decision makers of the country, they are not well aware of the challenges that these youth people face. So this adds to the discontent, where otherwise in a democratic setup, this issue would have ideally been solved, but because of lack of political representation, these issues are not being solved. Similarly, these are the democracies, but one of the problems that all of these countries have in common is that in these countries there exists huge inequality, and this is partly because of elite capture and corruption that are prevalent in the region. Now, what happens when a handful section of the society concentrate their power and their wealth? It breeds discontent. It makes other people feel that they are being excluded from the fruits of power, and this is quite prominent happened in Nepal, which is why the protesters demanded that the government of the day should resign, and it actually happened. Similarly, one of the most important aspects about these protests is the wide use of digital and social media. Now, you need to understand social media allows people to rapidly communicate. So when people who are already feeling bad, they communicate among themselves, it helps them to amplify their grievances. It helps them to communicate their grievances to someone who is also facing a same kind of a challenge that they are, and this allows people to mobilize and generate huge responses to their demand, right? So this is why this is different. It uses digital media, which amplifies the discontent, which helps people mobilize in larger number and in shorter duration of time. So this is the common driver of Gen Z's protest in all these countries. But have you ever thought why this protests are happening in 2025? Why not in 2020 or why not in 2030? There is a very good reason behind it. First of all, as the wide use of social media, you can understand that world has become interconnected. So youth living in one country, they are aware of the problems that are faced by youth in another country, and at the same time, they can also draw inspiration from a successful mobilization of people that may happen in one country. So this leads to a domino effect. If a youth mobilization is successful in one country, it would automatically encourage people who are facing a similar kind of a problem in another country to generate similar kind of protests in their country, right? Also, social media, you need to understand, is not just a tool of mobilization. It is also a tool where people living in one country might compare themselves with people living in another. Now, what is most common thing that you can notice in an Instagram reel? You'd see an influencer who'd live a lavish life, who'd go on holidays in picturesque location, eat nicest food possible, and this would lead to an aspiration among people who are watching those reels. And when those aspirations do not translate into ground reality, it automatically breeds discontent. It leads to disconnection or feeling of dissatisfaction among people, right? And this is what is happening with wide use of social media. And added to that problem is the rising economic pressure. Now you'd also have good aspirations. It is very good for us to have rising aspirations because it is what is our driving force in the real life, right? But when you are unable to meet those aspirations due to lack of adequate jobs, due to rising inflation, due to higher cost of living, it impacts your sense of belongingness, and this is what is happening in the youth. And also because of the lack of political representation, youth are blaming the existing generation who are ruling, that are older generations, of leading to these crises which they are facing. So as they have lack of political representation, they do not think that the people who are in power, who are somewhat older in comparison to Gen Zs, they are not conversant of the problems faced by Gen Zs. So this is why this crisis or this growing frequency of protest has happened in 2025. All of these factors have played a very important role. Now, what makes these Gen Z's protest distinctive or different than the protest that has happened before? First of all is the use of online medium to generate offline activism. Now, social media has played a very important role in shaping narratives, in sharing of grievances, in organizing the events of protest and bringing international attention to these issues. Why do you think we living in India are discussing protests happening across the globe? This is because of the wide use of social media, which has not just made their grievances public, but it has also made the pictures of these protests public, inciting many other people in different countries. Similarly, it is the faster spread or virality of issues, which is partly due to social media, that this protests have triggered responses. For example, one of the reasons why youth in Nepal protested, it was because the governments of Nepal decided to curb down the use of social media. They imposed several restrictions on the people's use of social media in Nepal. And this created a trigger for the youth in Nepal to elicit a reaction which saw in form of protest. And this protest was so vociferous, it led to decline and fall of then government in Nepal. Now you also need to understand the cause of this protest. What are the protesters demanding? Are protesters demanding jobs? Are protesters demanding basic needs of life? No, they are demanding higher quality need of life. Some areas they are demanding services, safety, health, jobs, all of which are somewhat above the basic needs of life. So what makes Gen Z's protest distinct is the use of social media. Use of social media in a way, it triggers response in different parts of the globe. And similarly, they are focusing on issues which are of higher quality of life, not just basic issues like food and security. Okay. Similarly, there are other two factors which require some discussion in detail. Now, you need to understand, for any protest to happen before, you need a political structure which would manage those protests. You need a political structure that would give that protest a direction in a particular manner, right? But this is not happening in the Gen Z's protest. Often these protesters are not tied to any political party. They are not even tied to a non-governmental organization. Now, there are both good and bad aspects about it. First of all, when they are not tied to a political structure, it gives them the flexibility. It gives them the right kind of an authority, which in case of political alignment would have been dismissed by the government of the day, right? So this is the first benefit. Second benefit is that as these protests are organic, these have become quite horizontal in their structure. There is no hierarchy of protesters. There is no one guiding them. So these protesters have become in a way leaderless. Now, whenever protests do not have leaders, these are more decentralized networks. Now, one of the benefits of these decentralized networks is that it helps in rapid mobilization of people. That is why you'll see hundreds and thousands of people protesting in one go, because these are not protesters who are incited by a leader. So this is the benefits that you get out of a leaderless protest. These are the benefits that you get out of a non-institutionalized protest. It gives them flexibility. It allows them to rapidly mobilize. But there are certain challenges also because of these kind of problems. What are these challenges? Now we need to understand, when mobilizations are rapid, there is also a possibility that sustaining of this rapid mobilization would become difficult. Now, I try to bring your attention towards Gandhian principle of protest. Now, if you remember, one of the criticizable aspects of Gandhian protest was his strategy of struggle, truce, and struggle strategy. Now, Mahatma Gandhi, like every other human, had many shortcomings, but he was a brilliant political strategist. One of the reasons that Mahatma Gandhi highlighted to justify his STS kind of a protest scheme was that he was well aware of the fact that youth or any normal people wouldn't be able to protest throughout the time. They need some instances where would they intensify their protest, but they also need a brief period of time to consolidate their protest. This was a period of truce. In these times, Mahatma Gandhi used to mobilize the organization of the Congress, and this truce period allowed Mahatma Gandhi to generate second phase of protest that was known as struggle. So this was one of the most criticized aspect of Gandhian philosophy. But you need to understand, in that regard, Mahatma Gandhi was very realist in nature because he understood the psyche of normal people. Because sustaining a movement for a longer duration of time can be quite difficult in terms of demand of resources, expectations of fatigue, and counter pressure done by the government of the day or the colonial rule. So these mobilizations also, they have become quite rapid, and you need to also understand, because of their rapid mobilization, these mobilizations were not able to sustain for a longer duration of time. They were very short-lived. Similarly, whenever there is absence of any leader for the protest, it gives a lack of direction to the protest, right? So whenever there is no leader, there is no clear strategy of the protest. There is no one way where you can generate and put this demand to the ruling class, right? So because of these vague and broad demands, you need a leader who would be able to filter those demands and successfully put these demands to the ruling class. And the reasons of protest needs to be communicated clearly so that the causes of protest needs to be addressed. So this is one of the reasons. Similarly, you need to understand, in modern democracies, the power of the state to repress any protest is quite huge. So through arrest, through violence, through co-optation by elites, there is a possibility that some of these protesters might be mollycoddled with. And this is what has happened in many countries. And sometimes lack of political representation also means that in no way the demand of those protesters would be translated into policy. So yes, there is a possibility that due to protests, the protesters or the Gen Zs would be able to put up some of their demands. But these demands would not be automatically translated into policy if they do not have a person who is cognitive of their fact and who is responsible for making policies, or a person who is responsible for implementing policies. So these are the problems or the limitations that Gen Z's protesters have faced in these countries. That is, lack of political representation, lack of a leader who becomes a face of these protests, who puts these demands to the people who are in charge of making policies. Also, these protests, just by the way they were rapid in their mobilization, fails to continue for a longer period of time because of many constraints that I've already mentioned. And because of state repression, because of cooptation by elites, there is also possibility that fair share of these protesters might not decide to protest further. Right? So these was all about Gen Z's movement. Now, before solving a practice question which is directed as specifically as per UPSC pattern, there is a very important announcement. Now, the kind of discussion we had today is a very flexible discussion. So you can use these arguments in your essay, in your GS one answer writing, in your polity answers, but you need to have the ability to write answers. One of the sure short ways to get the right content for writing answers and to get your papers corrected is if you take admissions in our P2I foundation batches. Now, as the name suggests, P2I foundation batches, it covers everything from prelims to mains to interview. Everything would be covered. And if you take admissions right now, you'd start on a batch which starts from tomorrow, that is 18th of November. And to take admissions before making the payment, if you keep one thing in mind, if you use the code ATS Live, it will help you fetch 7,000 rupees discount, not on just 2027 course, but also on 2028 course and also on optional courses. So please remember, you'll thrive when you use the code ATS Live. And in addition to that, you'll also get 7,000 rupees off. Now coming to the question, which is exactly made on a pattern of a question that appeared in 2021. In 2021, UPSC asked a question relating to right to privacy, in which it belongs to which article of Indian Constitution. Similarly, I've created a question, right to protest is protected under which article of the Indian Constitution. Please do let me know out of these four which is the correct answers, and the one who answered it correctly will get a thumbs up from my side. Okay, so you'll know you've answered it right. And before concluding this video, if you want to download the notes, you should, because these are important. You can go to this Telegram channel ATS Live, and if you have troubles finding it, you can always scan the QR code for the same. So I'll see you again tomorrow, today at 9 PM. Please have a very good day.